living well below the money that I was bringing in, and not going, oh, look at me, I'm 26 and I'm making all this money. I didn't want people to know I was making money other than the people I was trying to get to invest in me.
Zane, thank you for coming, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Listen, you and I have been talking a lot of trash for months and months now. And again, we grew up a world apart, and we kind of got connected on similar missions and similar sentiment. You obviously grew up in Idaho and were driving your dad's Jeep to school at like 8 years old. And I grew up in California, but I've always appreciated your perspectives on things. As a younger man, I obviously tried to really educate myself on finances with things like, The Millionaire Next Door or books like Burn Rate. And Burn Rate specifically is one that I've been thinking about a lot. And the idea is, look, you buy a book and the book actually owns you now, because that book will burn, let's say, 13 hours of your time.
Yeah.
Right. So all these little things, you buy a car and that's going to burn a certain amount of time. You buy a fish tank. God, man, I mess with my kids' fish tank all the time, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Apparently you have too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We talk about it a lot. And we just talked about the Fight Club, and the quote from the Fight Club is, the things that you own end up owning you. No. And we can go down any road and look at this. And this doesn't mean that you should be a pauper and, live with nothing. But whatever possessions we buy, we think we own. So let's say a nice car.
Right.
Okay,
you like cars.
I like cars. I'm kind of
Me,
a car nut.
Not so much. But my Highlander is pretty sweet, I gotta say.
But I'll tell you, and this is another conversation maybe, but the timing is everything. So I didn't embellish my car fetish, until later in life. I still liked them, but I knew, okay, the timing's not right because I need to.
I think you meant indulge. You said embellish. I think you mean you didn't indulge your car fetish.
True. Okay, maybe the wrong choice of words. But no, it's now I get to later in life because I did things right for 40 years.
Sure.
But anyway, okay, so we buy a car and we think we own it, but it turns around and starts owning us, because now what do? Oh, it's a nice car. Well, we're going to park further away out in the parking lot. So we have to choose a different parking spot. We're going to wash it on a routine basis, maybe in our driveway, or maybe, run it through the car wash at $15, $20, to keep it clean. But then what are we going to do about work? We have to pay for that car. And so it owns our time. So instead of having our free time, we're going to work and we're making sure that we're earning a living in order to pay off that car. Of course, unless we bought it with saved money, we've worked ahead of time. But cars, you name it.
A buddy of mine was talking about an RV the other day.
Yeah.
Right. Like apparently he has a friend, moved up here, got really excited. He's like, I'm going to move up. And again, I think he was moving from Southern California. He's like, I'm going to move up to Idaho. I'm going to get an RV. I'm going to travel the country. It's going to be great. And he's like, well, okay. But you could also just stay in hotels, because by the way, you don't have to pay anything when you're not staying in the hotel. It's really pay for play. And the guy gets an RV and he just eats it. Every single month, he has to spend all this time getting it prepped for the season. He really only takes it out 4 times a year. Gets it prepped. He has to load it. He has to unload. He has to store it somewhere, right? Then he has to spend a couple days bringing it over, the whole thing. And then at the end of the season, obviously he has to, break it all down, weatherproof it, go store it, all of these things. And he eventually, after a few years, realized, okay, I've owned this for 5 years. I've used it fewer than 20 times. It's cost me umpteen thousands and thousands of dollars. The amount of time was this is insane. The effort involved in this idea of owning this RV and whatever idea of life he was going to have with it absolutely did not play out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you take that even further. You get an RV that gets 8 miles a gallon. So you're burning $3.50 or $4 worth of fuel every 8 miles. Then when you get to your destination, what do you have to do? Wherever you are, whether it's a KOA campground or a national forest campground, you're paying a fee to park based on how long the RV is. So you get a nicer RV, some of them you're paying $100, $120, $140 a day to hook up your RV for the right to park it there. Well, what's a hotel cost? when you factor in how much 8 miles per gallon on fuel, how much extra fuel you burn, and what the hookup costs are, you could have driven a very comfortable car and stayed in a very nice hotel. And like you said, there aren't any storage fees. You're not getting it ready 2 days ahead of time. The clean water needs to be clean and the gray water tank needs to be dry, and all these different, the batteries need to be charged, and you don't need a place to park it, in the whatever off-use hours or off-use months, if you will. So, and that's just one example. How many of us have nice homes? Okay. Now, what do you give up for that nice home? Because you think, I want whatever. It could be a certain community. It could be a certain size. Okay, so let's say you get a bigger house than you've had in the past. Are you going to own it, or is it going to own you? What do you have? You have a bigger house. Now what do you need? You need nicer furniture. You can't move the furniture you had in your old house into the new. So you want to update. You want to get this. Now you've got property taxes. Now you've got landscaping to take care of. So what's your Saturday become?
Right.
Your
Saturday becomes maintenance. There's a guy who actually lives right up the street. I was chatting with him, and he moved into the neighborhood. Again, moved from Southern California, but then moved around a couple times once he got here. And he went straight for the idealistic, like, I want 5 acres. Like, I'm going to give it. And he had 5 acres and, nice house and everything. But he said literally half of his weekend every single week without fail was gone. And he doesn't mean like, from 10 to 11:30 he was mowing a lawn. He literally had trees he had to maintain, landscaping, the entire thing. He was like, your whole Saturday or your whole Sunday. He even got the ride-on mower, and he's like, oh, this will be a snap. No, it's like 4 hours he was on this thing out there, whether it was, 106 or whether it's, 50 degrees, just maintaining and doing things. So he actually moved out of that house and moved into a smaller one in my neighborhood because like, I thought I wanted a yard. I can't handle a yard. Right? Like the yard takes now 50 days of my year. And by the way, if you consider that 52 weeks a year, you got 104 weekend days. He's like, half of those were gone to my stupid lawn and backyard.
Who owned who?
Yeah, right.
But we can go across the board, and we talk about this a lot in our gatherings when we get together, and just to discuss this so that it brings it out in the open, and people actually stop and think about it and go, wait a minute. Do I really want, so I don't know, think about a pet. Oh, I want a dog. Okay, well, what's a dog take? You got to have a place to put the dog. Who's going to take care of the dog when I'm at work? Oh, don't worry, I'll modify my schedule. I'll come home during my lunch hour and let the dog out. Oh, I'll take it out in the evening. I'll take it for a walk. No, that might be time that you could have spent with your family. So, the dog needs a place to sleep, so we're going to get him a nice pad somewhere.
Right.
Maybe a dog kennel, or if they're going to stay in the house, we need a special room in the house. We need dog food. Oh, now the dog's sick. We got to take it to the vet. So all these things, and we don't think up front. All we do is think about, it'd be nice to have a dog. And there's so many, layers deep of decision making that we pass up, and then we just kind of deal with it. And that's where, I really encourage people to say, hey, let's think about this. Let's think about what's life going to be like. Like we bought a ski boat a number of years ago, but for about 4 weekends in a row, we acted as if we had a ski boat. Okay, so we drove up to the lake. Well, guess what? We can't drive up to the lake in a normal car, because if we have a boat, we have to pull it with something. So I said, okay, the boat's going to have to come with, either an SUV or a truck to pull it. Well, then we'd get there and we'd watch other people unloading and getting all their gear. Oh, wait a minute. We need, water skis, or we need wakeboards, and we need ropes, and we need life.
Wait, you did this before you owned the ski boat?
We did it 4 weekends in a row.
Did you take your kids in your car? You're like, come on, kids, you're coming with me, and we're going to pretend like we're going to get all this benefit.
We're going to have all this fun.
Growing up in a house with you must have been lit. So wait, how old are your kids?
Nice way of you putting me down.
How it's not necessarily. How old are your kids? Wait, how old were your kids when you were doing this?
Young. My son was 8 and my daughter was 4.
Okay, so you have an 8 and a 4-year-old, and like, Dad, we want a boat. And you're like, all right, kids, let's pretend we have a boat. He's like, but do we have a boat? You're like, no, but we're going to pretend. He's like, can we pretend water ski? so you
Can we bring our pretend friends?
So you get your 8 and your 4-year-old in a truck or an SUV, and you go up to the lake that you would go water skiing or tubing on, and you're like, we're just going to watch these people. And your 8-year-old's like, we're going to like watch them have fun?
Yeah.
You're
Wait
like,
a minute.
that's
How,
right, kid.
how long do we have to stay here? And I'd be like, 2 or 3 hours. No. But think about it. Yeah.
Okay. So you really did this.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go up and you're like, it's an hour prep. You got to launch the boat. I got to go park the car. You got to not drift away.
You got to pay the fee to launch the boat. You got to get in line and wait until it's your turn to go, and on and on and on. And and this is a relative. It's relatively convenient where we live here in Idaho.
Sure.
Okay. When I lived in Southern California years ago, people would start their weekend of boating Friday. Okay, so it meant taking a day off work. So you missed that opportunity to earn the money on Friday,
right?
Because you had to drive. We went to Lake Havasu, or it was a 6 or 8 hour drive,
sure,
plus traffic. But we would arrive, and you'd get into the quay, you'd get into the line to put your boat in. Sometimes the line was 3, 4, 5 hours long. So you had to make sure you had enough fuel in the pull truck, in the tow truck,
to last the 4-hour idle,
to keep moving it and idling along. And you're in, out there in the desert where the reservoirs are. It's 85, 90 degrees at night. So you're still running the air.
Oh my God. Okay, so wait.
Anyway,
let's get back to your 8-year-old and your 4-year-old sitting in the SUV.
You really want to beat me up on this, don't you?
I am so in love with this. But just keep going. I think this is actually, it's so fair, right? It's so fair, which is, look, this is what you want.
Yeah.
Right? Like I had a conversation years ago with somebody. It's like, I would like this, right? I can't remember. It was like, you know what it was? And I'm not going to out her, but my wife was watching these social media, these 2 gals who were building furniture around the house. And I like building. And I was building a lot. Like I've built a lot of stuff for our house, like dining tables, because dining tables are one of those great things that it's like, you want a dining table to fit your space, right? And at one point we had this large kind of L space where a dining room table would fit. You want a dining table for that. It's going to be $4,000.
Easy.
Right? Easy. Yeah. And even when we had the $4,000 in the bank account, it's like, I'm not spending $4,000 on a table. Like, I'm just going to build one. So I went and got these big, like true 2x8 rough cut redwood. I really like building tables out of redwood. They are soft and they mark up, but it's this like incredible endearing thing where it's like, oh, this is where like we went through like a hot Yahtzee phase, and there are all these cup marks on the table, and we have little kids. They're going to beat up oak tables, and you're just going to be upset.
So why have it super nice $4,000 table?
Right. So I built I built a couple tables actually, and our most recent one was like, it was like $400 or $500, gigantic, fit perfectly. Like you could fit 16 people at it because I built a built-in bench around it with storage. Anyway, so my wife has this, she's like, I want to build stuff. She wants to participate. She wants to build some stuff.
Yeah.
And just conceptualize, she's like, I would like to build X. I can't remember what it was, like a side cubby or something. It's like, okay, what's your cut list? She was like, what do you mean? And we go through this long conversation about, okay, if you don't have a cut list, you don't know how much wood to buy. How much wood are you buying? And she was like, well, just enough for this. And I was like, okay, what's this? Like, you have to conceptualize this whole thing. And of course, like initially I was kind of being a jerk. I'm like, you idiot, just help her, dudes, like walk her through it. But it was the conceptualization of, you want this experience of having this cubby or this side table, whatever it was, and having built it. But this is what goes along when you're building all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same thing that you're doing, except you are dealing with like this consumer experience of, I want a boat. I want to have this experience of a boat. It's like, okay, but this is what goes along with it.
Yeah.
And even from my, brief experience with boats in childhood, like people on the swim team would have boats. And they would always talk about like the nightmare of having boats and like how much it costs. And of course, my only interaction was on the swim team camping trip when all those suckers had to bring their boats to schlep me around.
Yeah. And then you got to leave.
And then I got to leave.
You got to dry yourself off and walk away.
They're out there getting sunburnt, towing around ungrateful 12-year-olds. Anyway, so you go through the process.
Yeah, no, and so we can look at it across the board. You know, my brother and I were talking about actually this morning in the gym, and he just brought up something as simple as, okay, we want a new couch for the living room. Okay, so you get this nice new couch, whatever. You know, you've given up some time and effort in order to earn the money. Well, now that your new couch is there, you go, wait a minute. The couch doesn't really match our side chairs. So guess what? Now it's new chairs.
Right.
Well, now we got a new couch and new chairs, but you know, the carpet, the floor covering, we've had that for 6 or 8 years. It's kind of showing wear. Okay, so we're going to upgrade that. Pretty soon you've done the whole living room. And you can do this with any. You can do it with a bedroom or a bathroom or your kitchen. And that's whatever it is, it starts owning you and it starts telling you what you're going to do versus the other way around.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Listen, I actually got together with my wife right at the end of college. Okay. And what you just described was this great transition from living in a college atmosphere, which is like, we have a side table? Yeah. Like, awesome, right? Or like the spool. You remember the giant spool? Everybody has this. It's like
that was your table?
Right. And, you know, my wife and I, again, essentially grew up together as adults going from like, you know, 21, 22 to, you know, we're now in our 40s and have kids and everything. And having to go through this transition of, I don't want to buy this one thing, just a one-off, because it's not going to match these other things. And neither one of us wanted to spend the money to like redo everything. So we'd have to figure out along the way, like, okay, how can we work this out so we don't get into the trap of having to make everything match the perfect wood tone or the perfect style. And we live in what I would consider a beautiful house with well done things, but we were very cognizant as we were purchasing what little furniture we did purchase. It was like, okay, we have to make this so it's not like the particle board mismatched junk, but it's also not, we have to buy a whole new bedroom set every time we get a new lamp.
And you put a lot of thought into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So as you go through life, one of the things that we, you know, encourage all the time, you know, consider this. Consider, do you own it or does it own you? Right. Okay, so let's say, oh, I got a raise at work, or I've got my business. Oh, it's going well. Right. So what do? We start maybe buying nicer clothes. Okay, well, I don't want to wear my nice clothes to the, you know, to the diners, drive-ins, or dives. You know, one of the dumps that we go eat at. So guess what? We're going to start eating at nicer places. Well, if we're eating at nicer places, we don't really want to take some of our friends there because they might not fit in right and they might not dress well. So, we're going to have to upgrade. And so pretty soon we're upgrading, and we go down this road that we're not even really driving. It's like we're in the back of the bus being driven. And the new clothes lead to, or the raise, the better money leads to new clothes, leads to a nicer restaurant, leads to, well, we got to go to a nicer neighborhood. We got to go to a better, whatever, you name it, country club. You can see where this spirals, and it just spirals up, up, up. And this is kind of the American way, where we've driven or being allowed to be driven, thinking that this is going to bring us more happiness, more, whatever, more peace, more tranquility, because we live in a nicer neighborhood. We drive nicer cars. Our kids maybe go to nicer schools. And what we see in the surveys and the polls is this has nothing to do with happiness. This has nothing to do with enjoyment of life. But we're now being driven by our possession. We're being owned by our possessions and by our lifestyle and by even where we vacation. Well, we can't go to the same place we used to go because, you know, that just doesn't really fit into our new life. We need to go to a nicer place. My brother even brought up the example this morning. He threw one of his old girlfriends under the bus. He said, you can't imagine that. He said they had a rule in their house that no matter what you got for whatever day, special day, birthday, Christmas, whatever was spent, you had to outdo it the next time. So, if you got whatever, I don't know, a toy that cost $20 for your birthday, come Christmas, it had to be more than $20. And I said, that's kind of the model of how we live now,
right.
as we go through as adults. It's like, well, yeah, we've got this 3,000-foot house. We can't buy another house that's only let's go for the 4,000-foot house. Well, I've got a 2018 car. No. I need a new car. Let's go for the 2024, 2025 model. And we've got all these ideas that just, again, it spirals up. And now we've got we're not driving the bus anymore.
Did you, let me ask you this. You grew up in Idaho. You didn't grow up with a ton, right? I'm not saying you went without, right? Obviously not. But you didn't grow up with like a dump truck of money. You didn't grow up in like Sun Valley in some 5,000 square foot house or something like that, right? And nothing wrong with that. Fine. But you also came to a point in your professional career where, one, you graduate high school, you go off to college. Immediately after college, you go to chiropractic school, and you graduate from there and immediately go into practice down. You started in Southern California, correct?
San Diego.
There you go. And when you started making money, like what I would envision, somebody growing up with like, enough, but not a crazy amount in Idaho, getting into chiropractic school, graduating, and going down to San Diego, just making it rain, like going crazy. You're like, I have money, like real money for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
I've earned it myself. It is go time, right? But that's like distinctly different from what you ultimately did. Like, why? Because, by the way, when I first started making money, I did splurge and I got myself this 3 horsepower gas, monster remote control monster truck for like $500. It was like my one and only dumb consumer purchase. It wasn't even dumb. It was awesome. It was so great. And it's the classic, it owns you, because this is what I got this truck. I named it Max. It was a Traxxas, can't remember, but it had 3-speed automatic transmission, had wheelie bars. You could pop a wheelie going 30 miles an hour. It was incredible.
Your eyes just got big.
Oh, it was so great. It was so, and there was a construction site down at the near the water in the Bay Area. So like you're going over these 15-foot dirt jumps. And again, this is like a real construction site, super cool. And man, like every single time you drove it though, you had to buy gas, and gas is like $10 for a quart.
Yeah.
And then you're just like,
and something
the brakes weren't,
Yeah.
the brakes weren't great. So it was great to have in the big open space, but every time, you're like going near something, you tag it with one of the wheels, the wheel pops off.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, there goes $15. It was a pull start, like, but it's not like a gas, like a lawnmower pull start. It's just this little tiny pop.
Yeah.
You'd always get really frustrated and pull it too hard. And then you got to get like a news. And I had to get rid of it because although it was this incredible toy that was really fun, that I really like, I was like, I would like to share this type of thing when I have kids, with my kids. It was like, oh, this is a rich guy toy. Like, this is somebody who can spend $50 every time they take this out of the box.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy. It totally just drained my capacity to keep funding this little thing. So it was my dumb consumer purchase. And I'm sure you had one or two of those.
Well,
but like, how did you get past this when you started making money and like avoid that and then retire by 34?
Well, okay. So I had a little different, I guess, upbringing, obviously, but I had different parameters. And I learned this early on in life, and I was blessed to have really good financial mentors. What I set up with was, okay, so let's say whatever, I don't know, however much money you make, let's just pick a number. Let's say $50,000 a year.
Right.
What do people think? They think, okay, I have $50,000 a year. That's how much I make. I have that much to spend. Right. Okay. I set for myself, I said, no matter what I make, I want to live on 50% of what I make. It didn't matter. 50% is the max, and the other 50% I'm going to invest. And then I was even harder on myself because I thought, well, I'm living alone now. I can get by on less than 50%. So I constantly looked for ways to really get by on nothing. I mean, I had 4 roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment. Okay. And we took turns who was going to sleep on the couch, who was going to sleep in the lazy boy, and who got the 2 bedrooms. And we rotated because there were 4 of us that thought the same. It's expensive to live in San Diego, but we're going to save money. I drove a beat up 1978 Toyota Corolla. in a place where, guess what? You are what you drive. So if I was going to a place, I parked a block or two away and walked so that nobody saw what car I drove. Okay. But then I bought my first house. And it's funny nowadays because when I introduce this concept, it's a, you know, for young couples and young people, they've never even thought of this concept. Said, first of all, the first house you buy should not be one you live in. So actually, I had bought 3 houses before I bought the 4th house was the first one that I actually lived in. Okay. The first 3 were investments, and I let other people, renters, pay. So
if I may ask real fast, did you purchase them to own or occupy like for the first 6 months and then move out to rent, or did you just buy them as a straight rental?
I bought them as a rental.
Gotcha.
I never occupied. Now, where are you going with that?
Well, no, just because some people get very. I know a lot of people like. The people that recognize that that's a good strategy like the idea, but purchasing as a rental first, just straight out of the blocks is difficult from a financial standpoint because you have to come up with a larger down payment. You get less favorable interest rates. So a strategy that one strategy and one that I used is I would purchase to occupy and live there for 6 to 12 months, and then I'd move out. And that includes during my growth, similar to you, that includes owning properties that I was living in, then moving out to live in an apartment, right? Before we bought an actual house, because we moved around a dump truck at times in order to build up essentially build up rentals using owner occupancy financing, including at one point we used an FHA loan, Federal Housing Authority, and that allowed for a 3% down payment for owner occupancy. And then you only had to live there for, like 12 months, and then you could move out. So you could acquire a rental property for 3% down payment. You just had to live there for the first 12 months. And that's a strategy that's in my opinion, underutilized.
Absolutely. And the way that I did it, may be somewhat unique, and people might look at it and go, oh, I don't know if that's completely ethical. But I took care, I had a fairly large practice. Yeah. I took care of a lot of people. Well, obviously, I took care of some fairly wealthy people. They trusted me as their doctor. Now I'm only 26 years old, but they trusted me. So what did I ask them? Hey, how are your investments? How much money, what's your percentage return? I said, what if I beat your return? And so I got private people to finance my houses. So I didn't have to go to banks and lay down and, get whipped in the back by some loan officer who, you need this and you need to prove this and you need to have 2 years of tax returns. I didn't have 2 years of tax returns because I was just getting started. But I was making money and I lived very frugally. So I knew I could pay, I can buy these houses and I can rent them for this much, either positive cash flow or maybe a little bit negative. But I financed, and I've done that throughout my entire career at this point. I've financed very few properties in a conventional sense. Now, obviously, you have to have some trustworthiness. You have to have some believability. You have to have a little bit of salesmanship, because I would talk to these patients of mine and say, hey, if you're getting whatever, I don't know what it was. At that point, sounds crazy now, but if we were close to only double digits, if we could get a loan for 10 or 11%, that was outstanding financing back then.
Gosh, man. So
I remember my first loan that broke double digits, that got into single digits, that got into the 9s, was in 1990. And I'd been buying properties for 5 years at that point, or 6 years actually. Anyway, the way I financed mine was I showed that I was trustworthy, that people could actually trust their investments, their money with me. And so I would borrow money as a down payment and then buy a property. Well, nobody had to know how many people I did that with. Okay.
And this is the thing. That's not unethical. That's just the way the financial world works. You don't have to record necessarily private loans. So you don't.
I didn't tell people, hey, I'm doing this with 3 other properties or whatever. So I was buying properties way above what I could have qualified for if I went conventional.
Right.
And I was buying a property my goal was 4 properties a year. So I was buying 3 3 or 4 properties a year, every year, till I got to 47. My goal was 50.
And were these predominantly centered in Southern California, the San Diego area?
I started in Southern California, and then I realized, again, what was going to own me. And, you know, I've always valued my time tremendously. Well, in Southern California, what do? You sit in traffic. You know, if you want to go to the bank or if you want to go to some event, you sit in line. If you want to go to a popular restaurant, you know there's going to be an hour and a half, 2-hour wait. So I got tired of waiting. And I said, I'm going home. So I moved to Idaho about 4 years after having been in San Diego. So I don't know what I had at that point. I probably 15, 16 houses. And they were some of them were financed by this, you know, like, so my first property I'd get financed. Well, then I'd go to somebody else for the second one. Then maybe for the third one, I'd go back to the first guy and say, hey, I've been paying you now, you know, can you loan me some more money? And they kind of liked it because, you know, they were getting a constant stream of income because anyway, long story short, that's when I moved to Idaho because I just decided my time is worth more than sitting in traffic, sitting in lines, waiting for restaurants. I would take my entire lunch time trying to go to the bank because there was that much wait, that much line at the bank. I would sometimes be waiting in line knowing, oh, I've got patients lining up at my door for the afternoon. So anyway, I got out of Southern California.
Yeah. And this is actually something when I was talking to people years ago about real estate, I would always emphasize it's not the money. Like, yeah, you need some money, but it's your reputation. It's knowledge. It's capacity to put deals together and have people trust you, not unjustifiably, but be a trustworthy person and somebody with capacity that allows you to do what you're talking about. And I did not nearly that extravagant or awesome, but I did some similar things. And again, it came down to, it wasn't the money, right? Like there was one deal I was able to do that was 100% financed by the seller, and it was a seller carryback, and it was this large property, and it was because she knew me, and she was like, Matt is dynamite. He's not going to, and I made good on it, 100%. Like never missed a payment, never late a day, like no problem. And that's really what I think sets apart a lot of people that get into real estate as an investment and as a way to build wealth, compared to people who just are very limited by it and generally think like, well, I have to have all this money. I have to have, you know, a huge down payment, and maybe they acquire one home for their own private usage, which is wonderful. I mean, homeownership's a wonderful thing. It turns into a great asset for most people, but it's, hey, look, you got to think outside that box. You got to start realizing that it's not, you don't have to be beholden to these, you know, debt to income ratios, which, you know, always beat you.
LTVs, loan to value, all these things that banks look at. And I thought, I don't want my future being held up by some loan officer that's just going to look at numbers. Right. You know, and I tried with loan officers. I tried with the, you know, conventional banks, and I'd sit down and say, you know, listen, I'm a hardworking, honest person. You know, no, I don't have 2 years of tax returns. No, I don't have $30,000 or $40,000 sitting in your bank. And, you know, after getting a few no's, guess what? You figure out, okay, I need to go play in a different sandbox. Right. I need to change the way I'm going after it. Yeah. But getting back to what we started with, what owns you? The key to my life was that it didn't cost me much money. I didn't have, you know, Southern California, you got to have a fancy car. Well, I didn't. You got to go to, you know, the coolest, hottest places. I didn't. You have to go on, you know, outstanding vacations that you can brag to everybody come Monday. Yeah, guess what I did this weekend? You know, I went here skiing, or I went here on a surf trip, or I, you know, went to San Francisco, which used to be a nice town. Yeah.
Well, you know, you're talking the 80s.
Yeah. I mean, it really was. Yeah. You know,
I was actually born in San Francisco in 82.
Really?
Like, yeah. I've always wondered, like, my dad was going to med school at UCSF, and I was born when he was in med school. And I've always wondered, like, why were you into that? And his his recounting of what the city was at that time, he's like, you had like these wonderful little neighborhood restaurants and pubs, and you had like you had the park, and you had I grew up going to the Academy of Sciences. They had the two-headed snake. That was my favorite exhibit. Like, and they've rebuilt it. And when we were living there, we would take our boys there, but everything surrounding it, it's like, this is a train wreck. Everything just got worse and worse and worse.
Oh, they've destroyed. Same thing with Seattle, same thing with Portland. We used to go visit those cities for the weekend and just have wonderful times. And they've been destroyed now.
Yeah,
But-
I remember when I was Portland. When I was graduating from college, I went with my dear friend Max. He was like, "Hey, there's this brewery," because like Portland and Oregon in general became the ground zero for microbreweries and stuff, right? And he's like, "There's this brewery in Portland that has 200 beers on tap. Let's go check it out." And we go up there for the weekend, and it was clean, it was nice. Like, I had never been there. I was like, wow, this is like what because we went to school in Berkeley. Yeah. So my whole experience with city life was like, this is trash.
Yeah.
And then you go up there and you don't and again, this is 2004, 2004, 2005, like 20 years ago, it really was cool. And now it's just a nightmare. Yeah. Anyway, so what you're
so getting my lifestyle in San Diego was, again, what's going to own me and what am I going to own? And so I didn't go for the nice cars. I didn't go for the nice place to live. I didn't go for the nice restaurants. I didn't go for the expensive weekends. I went, places that didn't cost money. Or I drove my 1978 Toyota Corolla. And that allowed me to then turn around and own things, which was buying houses, buying real estate, and living well below the money that I was bringing in. And not going, oh, look at me, I'm 26 and I'm making all this money. I didn't want people to know I was making money other than the people I was trying to get to invest in me, And so I didn't do any of the, I guess what you would call normal stuff as a young professional. And I would have people, whatever, encourage me to, come on, Zane, go, come on, let yourself loose. Go buy, because I talk about sports cars that I liked and this and that. Go buy something. No, I'm gonna keep buying houses, 3 or 4 a year, and that's what allowed me. Like, my first retirement was at 34 years old, because I thought I've got enough for myself, and that's really the key. When we talk about what owns you, it's are we only thinking about ourselves? Because after my retirement and during my retirement, I got my butt kicked by a guy that turned into my mentor, and he's like, "Are you only worried about yourself? Is your lifetime just about making your investments and making enough money for you?" He said, "What about if you choose, if someday you do get married, if you have a family, what about your kids? What about So that's when I went, yeah, okay, got my butt kicked there. I was kind of selfish. Let's go back to working, but getting back to the point. When we're building things that own us, why are we doing it? Are we doing it to give us this joyous, tranquil, peaceful, low stress, low frustration life? Or are these things adding to our challenges and adding to our difficulty and taking our time? Because that's the one thing that, you can have unlimited money. You can have unlimited whatever. The one thing that we can never have enough of, and we don't ever know when we're running out of it, is what?
Life.
Yeah, life, time. There's only so many ticks in our clock, in our lifetime. Are we going to spend it accumulating things that end up owning us? Are we going to, like your friend, are we going to spend every Saturday taking care of this beautiful house that we bought? Or paying so we work all week to pay for the help so that we don't have to do it ourselves. Because I've got friends that, they're like, well, I don't take care of my landscaping. Go, yeah, but you pay somebody to do it. No, I don't work on my cars. No, you pay somebody to do it. Well, I don't care if I store my things because I pay the store. Okay, you're giving up your time to pay for all those things, rather than backing off and going, okay, let's spend more time with whatever, the friends that we've developed, the really close relationships. Let's spend more time with our kids, like you were sharing with me how you
God, the Olympics. We did the Todd Olympics yesterday. It was so lit. Like, and we had I was telling you, we had the medal ceremony, which was varying sizes of Rice Krispie treats that we had made, like little slices versus big chunks. We would play the Olympic the music, the whole medal presentation. We had a bunch of these just dumb games. Like we did the long throw basketball shot, so we had to stand across the yard and huck this. We were actually using a soccer ball. The basketball's too heavy, but we were hucking this soccer ball across the yard, and you only had 25 shots to make it into the basket. So like there we were, just like screaming and yelling.
So let's get a couple of take homes from this.
Yeah, right.
A couple take home messages. First of all, what are your kids going to remember 10 years from now? They're going to go, Dad, remember that day we did number 2? So they're going to have great memories.
Right.
Number 2, how much did that cost you?
Oh, Rice Krispie treats and marshmallows. That was it.
Yeah. You could have spent your day, whatever, I don't know. Not that we live close, but oh gosh, let's go to Disney World. Let's go to Disneyland. Let's go to Lagoon down by Salt Lake City.
Well, even you do closer things. Like say we wanted to play Nerf, like there's a Nerf war place. We could have gone and spent money there. We could have gone to Wahoo's. We could have gone VR1. I love VR1. It's a virtual reality headset spot. It's 7 stalls. You like rent a stall per an hour. And like we go at birthdays and go to VR. But I mean, and again, even with VR1, I think it is a good value if you want that. But even that, you're coming out of it for like $100.
Yeah.
You know, like
Top Golf.
Right. Oh, that's a great example.
Let's take the kids to Top Golf. And you're walking out of there $150, $200 bill, easy.
Right.
And so what you came up with was a little bit of creativity, a little bit of imagination. Let the kids be involved, and it didn't cost you a dime. So where does that money go? It can go into your investments. It can go into your future. It can go into the kids' future. And it didn't take more time this week. You don't think, well, we spent that much this weekend. Gosh, we better work harder to make more to make up for what we spent.
You know what happened this morning? They woke up and they're like, we didn't get to finish it because like we had to do dinner and stuff. And so we still had like wiffle ball, 5-gallon bucket golf that we had lined up. And my 7-year-old can chip. I don't know how, but he can swing a golf club better than anyone in the house. So we had that lined up in a few other games. The number one thing, they were like, when are we finishing this?
Yeah,
like,
let's
do
it again.
Right. And so they're dying to play these dumb games that we make up on the spot that cost us nothing and spend all day getting after it. I've always heard the concept of delayed consumption when it comes to like 401ks or like deferred or earning retirement accounts. But it's only in recent years that I've considered, okay, like if I had, let's say I had $100 to spend this weekend on like fun, recreational stuff. Delaying that consumption, be like, okay, we're going to spend $2.50 on the Rice Krispie treats and then save that $97.50 for next week, delay that consumption. And then if you just think of the trickle, it's like the $100 and the $100 and the $100, delaying that out to the end of the month. And then you have like, $400. It's, again, I always thought of it as retirement aspects, but you can have the delayed consumption with your just consumer choices on a regular basis as well.
Just choose differently. Right. And that's kind of been my concept my whole life. And that's what's allowed me to have the life I do now, is delaying what you're spending. Say, well, I want that, but it's not time for me to have it yet. I always thought early in life I was going to have, crazy cars, which I do now. I don't have a big collection. I just have 1 or 2 at a time. Well, maybe 6 or 7, but I have everything I want now, everything I could even imagine. Now that doesn't include, I don't have a Learjet. I don't have, some other things that people go, well, why don't you buy one of these? Well, no, because that's going to set back our ability to, continue investing so that my kids, my grandkids, however many generations are already set up.
And what's the utility? Like if you traveled frequently via jets, I bet you would have some kind of like jet share program, but it's not something like you engage in adventure bike riding, right? Where you're, transporting yourself around and that's the journey is the point, right? Instead of the jet, which is I have to get here as quickly as possible. It's not my understanding that's even something you engage in general.
No. And the key is I wanted all these things when I was 25, 30, 35. But guess what? I kept telling myself, it's not the right time in your life. And if we just instill that thought process, in people as they make these decisions, and they can put it off going, well, it's not really my time yet. I know my time's coming. I will be patient. You know, it's like I like to relate things to athletics. So if you get in as a freshman in college and you are the star in high school and you get in as a freshman in any sport, guess what? You're going to pay your dues. You're probably not going to be on the field or on the court or whatever. But if you're willing to go, okay, I'm going to work, I'm going to get better, then maybe your sophomore year, you get a little playing time, maybe junior year, you know, as you move up. And I always, you know, kind of saw spending money and investing in the same way, where now I see young, you know, a lot of the young people I work with, well, I just wanted it, so I bought it. Well, I wanted to go on that vacation, so I went. You know, all my friends were going to whatever, you name it. Right. They're going to Mexico for the weekend or for the week, or they were going to this concert in you know, Seattle. So I went to the concert, and I think, okay, I had those desires, but I said, it's not my time to have those. Well, guess what I do now? Any damn thing that jumps into my mind, because I've waited and spent the time investing, and now those investments are paying me way more than my life doesn't cost as much as my investments bring in every month. So it's having a life that you want and the happiness, but like you did with your Olympics with your family, find a different way of doing it right now so that you can have this life in the future.
Yeah. With a lot of people that you work with financial stuff, because you do a lot of financial coaching and you hold gatherings and try to create communities around, you know, intelligent decisions that lead to better long-term life outcomes, yeah. Right? Do you generally try to catch people, or what age group do you work with? Is it usually like the 20-year-olds that are trying to get ahead of it, or is that more of a rare character and it's more of like the 30-year-olds who are looking at it saying, hey, this hasn't really been working well, yeah. Or this, I feel like I'm now a decade behind?
Yeah, no, you just hit it. My typical people that come into our organization is 35 to 40. Okay, because you can't tell some people early on, you can't tell them, and I try not to tell them at all. I try to just show them how life is going to run. Some people will accept it and a lot won't. So the 25-year-olds, they come out, they're full of piss and vinegar, and they're going to just take over the world. And I'm going to make so much money, it doesn't matter. You know, and they've got the FOMO, you know, fear of missing out. They've got the YOLO. Well, I don't want to wait until I'm old like you and, you know, to have my fun. I want to have fun now while I can enjoy it. You know, and then I see them 2 years later, 3 years later, 4 years later, I go, how's that fun going for you? And so I have to back off, if you will, and believe me, I've learned this over time. I've been the hard-headed coach that tried to beat it into people, go, no, you don't understand how you're screwing up your life. No, I got to have a house at 25. No, I got to have that F-150 Ford at, you know, I need it. I need that nice car. I need to go on these and go, that's going to have nothing to do with your happiness in life. But a lot of times I have to just back off and let them go make those mistakes. You know, oh, I need to be married. I want to get married when I'm, you know, this girl, oh, this guy. I'm like, think about this. You've got plenty of time when you're young. And so anyway, get back to your question. No, most of the people I meet have screwed up their lives. And they're like, no, the frustration, the stress, the anxiety, it's keeping me up at night. I've got bills I can't pay. Or like, you know, one of my favorite people in life is, he was in my training program, and he got out, he started making money in his practice, and he went just bonkers. You name it, he had it. You know, his wife had a brand new, you know, one of the nicest minivan things for their kids. Really nice. He had
Chrysler Town and Country.
Yeah, whatever. He had, you know, a really nice F-150 Ford. He had a travel trailer. He had a ski boat. He had a sauna installed in their house. They had all these things. And I just sat back, and I think he about 6 or 7 years in practice. And he comes to me and he goes, I've made a ton of money and I don't have any of it. And he said, basically, he said, I'm ready to listen. So we sold his expensive F-150. We sold his wife's fancy minivan. We sold his travel trailer. We sold his boat. And we downgraded his spending in his life and started actually making investments for the first time. And I can tell you now that was probably 6 years ago. He's got over $1 million in investments at this point.
And he started with nothing.
6 years later, yeah. Well, he'd been in practice 6 years and had zero. He actually had negative because he owed money on everything. So he went from there. 6 years later, he's got $1 million invested in an IRA and some different, in a couple of properties. He just bought his own building, as a matter of fact. So I hate doing it because I'd like to get people early on. Well, I'd like to get like 5, 6 year olds and be able to talk to their parents and say, okay, this is how we train our kids, to value things and not get things that own them. Because, I was astounded. I read research every morning, and I'm astounded at what they put forth, where they asked these, now granted, these were inner city youth. These were young people that grew up in big cities that didn't have a lot of, if you don't have vision for the future, if you don't have belief in your future,
right,
my Lord, you're not going anywhere.
Right, because you can't make wise decisions if you can't conceptualize 5 years from now.
How you're going to get...
Because if your decision is siloed to today only, and it has no recourse or repercussion later on, then it doesn't matter.
That's exactly... Right. So they give these 9th and 10th graders a choice. Do you want a pair of Air Jordan shoes, or do you want someone to pay for 4 years of college at any college you choose? More than half of them took the Air Jordan shoes because they couldn't conceptualize. It wasn't a value proposition. They couldn't conceptualize that they couldn't see themselves going to a college.
Yeah, right.
For 4 years.
So that had no value to them anyway.
So it didn't have any value. And so I look at that and say, okay, what did I have that a lot of people don't have at, whatever, whether it's 18, 20, 22, somewhere in there. I had this vision of where I wanted to be at 40, 50, 60 years old. And I've been so blessed. I have exactly, I have amazing kids. I have an amazing life. I have amazing health. And coupled with that is I have amazing finances. It didn't happen overnight. It happened over 40 years. And I had to have that patience and that vision to go, this is how I see myself down the road.
Right.
But the problem is, we're not giving people, we're not allowing them to kind of paint that picture and see that vision and go, yeah, I can see myself. Oh, I'm only 25 now. I can see myself at 50 years old. Where do you want to be at 50? And do you think how you're going about it today? I had a conversation the other day with, I think he was 32 years old. And I said, where do you see yourself at 50? I'll be retired. I said, really? What are you going to retire on? And he said, I don't know.
Money.
Yeah. No,
money.
This was his concept. I said, what are you going to retire on? And he said, probably $5 million. I said, okay. So 32 to 50, you've got 18 years. How long have you been working? I got out of school at 21. I said, so you've been working 11 years already. What do you have saved? Nothing. So in 11 years, you've saved nothing. And you're telling me in 18 years, you're going to save $5 million. And that's when it kind of hit him. He just sat there and he got kind of glassy-eyed. And he's like, that's not going to work, is it? And that's when I knew, okay, I got him. Now I can help him. Now we broke that facade down that people that grow up in America think that they're just going to be wealthy for some reason without making the investments, without making the sacrifice. It's just going to happen. And unfortunately, if you can imagine this, the average 65-year-old in America has $82,000 saved.
It's really rough.
Do you know?
Said 65?
Yeah. Do you know what kind of problem that causes? I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to get your $2,200 a month from Social Security and go, well, that coupled with all the money I've got saved, $82,000, yeah, I'm going to live on that for the next 15 years.
Can I ask you something? Because look, you didn't grow up with a lot, and I didn't grow up with a lot, and there's a broad sentiment that the reason that the average 65-year-old has a roughly $80,000
nothing basically
is it's the world's problem, right? And this is the overwhelming sentiment that you hear throughout the nation, which is like the reason that's happening is not because of the 65-year-old. It's because that we don't have opportunity, we don't have these things. But if that were true, you and I would be up a creek.
Oh yeah.
Like it would be over. Even within my family, I can tell you that I have 2 siblings that have very little. And by the way, I'm the youngest.
Yeah.
And then me and one other sibling have a lot more. These are people within the same family unit. And it's like, if that were true, and I was the youngest and I got the least attention and least resources from the family,
yeah.
which was my experience. I know some people say the youngest is babied. That was not, my family is a different thing. But the point is, if that were true, then like we would all end up in the same spot.
Yeah.
And if again, that were true, you and I would not be in the positions we are. And I'm obviously not in your position, but I would like to think I'm at least on the way to be
you're
at least
on the right.
part of it.
You're on the right road.
Right. And so that's what I can hear people objecting to in general, which is, hey, it's not your fault. It's the world's fault. But the problem with that is if it's the world's fault, and there's nothing I as an individual can do about it, then why even try? Like it's over. Like oh, this is not fair, blah, 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 blah.
I hear that all the time. And, oh, well, it's this and this and this and this. I've been held down by, and yeah, you can go, we always talk external, internal.
Right. You
can talk external all you want. Oh, well, the weather's bad today. I guess it's going to be a bad day. Oh, well, I'm just not lucky like you. I hear people, quite often, they say, well, I'm just not good with money like you are. I go, really? It's called discipline. It's called patience. It's called resisting, urges. I have urges just like everybody else. I just don't follow them. Yeah, I'd love to go out and buy a fancy new sports car. Oh, it came out and I like red. Gosh, I'll buy one. No, I'm going to put money into an investment. I'm going to wait and let that investment pay me. And then maybe down the road somewhere I'll buy that.
Right.
Okay. But trying to get a 25-year-old to listen to me, next to impossible.
Right.
Now there's a few out there that have maybe watched their parents and had parents that taught them things. And then they say, yeah, I want to get started early. I want to have investments. I want to do this. No, I don't need to buy a house that I'm going to live in. I can buy a house that my renters will live in, or I'll buy a duplex or a fourplex, and I'll live in one unit of the fourplex, which was the first place I lived that I actually owned. So I bought 3 houses, and then the fourth property I bought was a fourplex. I lived in one unit and put the other 3 up for rent. Okay. Right. So I could have one little corner unit down here, and my mortgage was paid by my 3 renters. So I lived for free.
Right.
Okay.
I was really worried about money when I was graduating from college, and I remember this distinctly. I was in tutoring and education even when I was at Cal. I would tutor the other Cal students, and because of that, they're like, "Hey, do you want to run this like study group? All you got to do is sit there, do your homework, just make sure the kids are studying." I was like, "Sure." And this was when I was a senior. I literally would sit there, and I don't know why. And again, I didn't grow up with like financial education, but I would run through these spreadsheets of my theoretical 401ks and working out like, okay, if I invested $50,000 every single year from 22 to 65 and got 8% return, what would I have at 65? And I remember doing these calculations over and over and over. And then I came to the broader realization. It's like, okay, that's fine, but that's at 65, right? Like what if you need, like what you really want, yes, you want freedom and security at 65, but let's work that back. what do you want at 35? And my answer was, I wanted to have freedom to be able to, be with my family, or more stability earlier on, because I didn't want to delay my life until 65. So just kept working it back. And I ultimately came to the conclusion at 22 that the 401k paradigm for financial freedom prior to retirement was a wish sandwich.
No.
You had no capacity to take advantage of the money that you were saving up in a meaningful way until you were 65.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going to be something that was going to enrich my life, vehicle to enrich my life and freedom as a younger adult, right? At like 30 to 40, the 401k was all obligation. From 40 to 50, it was double obligation because I was running out of time, right?
Yeah.
And
well,
so
you had no leverage.
Right. Like you don't have anything to mess around with.
You had no leverage. So I ask people all the time, would you like to have $50,000 getting a 4% return, or $30,000 getting a 10% return, or vice,
Right.
So we have to get them thinking about numbers. And just like you did, you went through it with your leisure time, if you will, your work study time.
Yeah, right.
But you were far enough ahead, Matt, that you had these numbers in front of you. And that when I talk with young people, especially, I put the numbers out and go, okay, do these numbers make sense? Because if you can leverage, if you can put $10,000 away, or you can put, and of course now you can't, but put $10,000 into a property. Okay, so I put $10,000 into a property that cost $100,000. Now I'm getting some return on $100,000, but I've only got $10,000 in it.
I would like to make a quick point. If you have $10,000, you can buy a $300,000 house today, right now. You can use an FHA loan, 3% down. You can go and live in it. You can get a fine $300,000 house in this area going to Eagle School District. Like, it's not going to be the biggest house. It's probably going to be 1,500 square feet. Totally fine. You can get those houses and start from that. I mean, that's
start.
And here's the classic education in investing as like stocks and bonds and deferred tax accounts, like that as a vehicle. Like the Rich Dad Poor Dad, Kiyosaki made this point really well when he was talking about different vehicles. He's like, look, you could get from California to New York on a bike, but that's the wrong vehicle if you need to get there faster, right? He's like, the same thing. If you want to have this leisurely experience and enjoy the countryside, a plane is not the right option. You need to take like a train or do a car. These different vehicles. But almost everyone is funneled towards the 401k vehicle as a fix-all. But in reality, one of my oldest real estate mentors, I met this guy when I was 23. And I was like, hey, can I buy you coffee? Because that was the only sense I had. Like, if you meet somebody who has something you want to know, offer to buy them coffee, right? So I take out this guy, and he's like 60. And here's dumb Matt, who knows nothing. And I'm like, hey, so I don't know money, right? Like, explain real estate to me. And he brought this legal pad. I remember this. So he takes out this legal pad and this felt pen, and he's like, all right, here's the thing. Do you have a savings account? And I was like, yeah, I got a savings account. He's like, great. That's you. How do you make money? I was like, oh, the bank pays me money. It's great. Like, I have this like
he's
$5,000.
Take it out of the bank.
He's like, okay, here's the deal. And he writes down, he just educates me really quickly. He's like, if you own a house, you make money through appreciation, you make money through inflation, you make money through principal reduction, you make money through depreciation, you make money through all of these different, he's like, you make money roughly 5 different ways. And he ironed this out. And he's like, now, the biggest thing you have to realize is like, if you have whatever money you have in your savings account in 20 years, what's that going to be? And like, I was pretty quick with math. I'm like, well, it's going to double every, like 12 years. So it's like double almost twice. And he's like, great, that's like nothing, right? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, but if you buy a house in 20 years from like 23 to 43, and I'm not at the 43 mark yet, but I'm close. He's like, if you buy a house from 23 to 43, at 43, you're done. He's like, 20 years you buy a house or two, you're done. You're going to own them almost outright, or at least have paid it down. He's like, worked out all the numbers. He's like, just with base inflation of 3 to 4%. And this was back in 2005. So he's like, we are spending this height of the Iraq war, like the whole thing, right? He's like, we're printing money. They were saying it 20 years ago. He's like, we're printing money so fast. There's no way in the world we will not experience rampant inflation. He lived through the Vietnam War and the inflation of the 70s.
So he knew it was coming.
He knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But I literally went home that day to my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, I need to buy a house yesterday. Like, this is the thing that we actually want.
Okay, so let's stop right there with that thought, because I will get to this point with a lot of people, and then they just blow the whole world up. But I don't have the money to get started. But I don't have the down payment. I can't get anybody to give me any money while they sip on their $6 coffee. Or they've got their $60 Stanley cup sitting there. Or they're wearing their, whatever, $300 shoes. And so that's the key is you can't drive a new F-150 Ford and expect to buy a house. You can't have a Stanley cup in every color available. You can't go on weekend trips. So when we talk about reality, people want everything you're talking about. They want to make those investments. Oh, well, it makes sense to me. Yeah, I want to buy a house, but I can't because I don't. And they turn to external because I don't make enough money. And what I'm always having to bring them back to is, no, you're spending your money in the wrong places.
Right. And you can't assume that you already know enough. I have a dear friend from college who's Irish, moved back to Ireland after college, and we actually both found our way. He started working for, can't remember, corporate something. It was like Walmart or something in Ireland. Anyway, right out of the blocks, and he's like, this is not right. He just knew instinctually. He's like, this is not what I want for my life. And he started learning about real estate. And again, grew up broke, very small town in Ireland, and he just started going to property owners associations. He didn't own property. He had no hope of owning property. He had no money. Like, he had worked hard and saved up a little, but not very much. And he literally just started showing up at these meetings and introducing himself and talking to people. He was like, hey, can I take you out to coffee? Started meeting people, telling them his goal. He started learning. He started buying property within, I think, 12 months because people started figuring out who he was, understood how hardworking he was, understood what his goals were. And they were like, hey, you're worthy of helping. And let me teach you. And like, by the way, then you can do this. But it's like, you got to stop thinking the world is the problem. Your consumer.
I don't make enough money. And,
right.
Oh, it costs so much and my rent's this high. And so you're exactly right. But I see people say, well, my rent's too high. I go, where do you live? Well, I live in a 1-bedroom. It's $1,800 a month. Really? Okay, so that 1-bedroom, have you ever thought about getting 2 or 3 roommates? Well, that wouldn't be really cool because I like to live alone. Oh, okay. Well, keep living alone and don't buy any houses. Don't buy any real estate. Oh, well, you want me to get rid of my 2022, whatever, you name it, fill in the blank car that cost me $600 a month plus $150 a month in insurance. So it's $750. No, I don't want you to do that. Because I know how much you like that car. Oh, well, you don't want me to go to lunch at such, fill in the blank. So all these ways that their money goes away from them. And I'm like, you only have to make, a relatively modest amount of money. The key is don't spend it all. And we've got, these kids pull out their iPhone 15s. Really? I've got an iPhone 6. And if it breaks or I drop it or it wears out or it quits working or whatever, another iPhone 6 cost me $400 versus what's an iPhone 15.
Oh, God, it's like $1,300. But they set up payment plans so you don't feel it.
You don't. Bingo. And same thing with, you just hit on, we could go down that road all day. Student loans. Okay, so I graduated from college with college and chiropractic. I was a doctor at 25 years old. I had $24,000 in student loans, which to me was a mountain. I paid them off in 9 months. And guess what I didn't do? I didn't buy any Starbucks coffee. Of course, we didn't have cell phones back then. Doggone it, we didn't have any Stanley cups either. And my life was just not complete without. So
it's what you've been missing your whole life.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't go out on Friday night to the clubs and buy $8 or $10 or $12 drinks or whatever they cost nowadays. We had a really low key weekend. I go, how much did Friday night cost? Well, I don't know. It was $120 at the bar. Really? So that $120, instead of putting it somewhere where it might be used, you drank it,
There it is.
on Friday night.
Right.
So it all comes back to not how much money you make, it's what you spend. And, getting back to this, what owns you or do you own it? And what we started with, okay? I live in a 2,600-foot house. Now, yeah, I have a 3,000-acre ranch, but guess who runs it? A hay and cattle operation. I don't live out there. So do I want it as an investment? Do I think it's a good investment? Do I kind of like having it? Yeah. I don't live on my ranch. I've got an operation out there that produces tons and tons of hay and a lot of cattle. And I go out there very seldom. Okay. So same thing with anything across the board. You can have whatever you want, but you got to decide, how do you want to spend your money?
Right. One last point that I think to that end. I remember I had a college group that was in a unit, and they needed a new stove, and I ended up getting a nice G stove, square. And this was like 10 years ago. So again, wife and I are really scrimping and saving, buying, the square cast iron, grates, and, big pot burner, 5-burner stove.
Yeah.
And I remember telling him when it arrived, it had like the main middle griddle too, which is super cool. Love the cast iron grills. But I made a comment. I was like, yeah, it's nicer than my stove. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, I mean, it's nicer than my stove. And they're like, why don't you just get a stove like this for you? I was like, oh, I can't afford it. Just like the dumb look on their face. It's not dumb. It's just like, it doesn't compute. Yeah. And again, it's just, it's not that I technically didn't, like I had the money in the bank account, but I also had a 4-burner stove that had the circle old school grates on it, that had a dumb pilot light that always went out on the oven. But you know what? Like it worked. It worked. And it's like, I didn't have the money in my life. I didn't have enough money in my life that I could throw away a functional stove to get a newer, better one.
The power in your thinking came from a little bit of humbleness and just saying, I don't have the money to, that it's that modesty, it's that humbleness. Instead of telling yourself, well, I work hard and I deserve it. I've earned it. I should spend this money on myself. There's so much power in that, in backing away and saying, no, I don't deserve it. I didn't earn it. And if I did earn it, in my mind, I earned it for a different reason. So you were buying them a nicer stove than you had, which I've done that, many times over the years. But it's that modesty, it's that humbleness going, no, I don't need, whatever, fill in the blank. Sure. I'm picking on people with Stanley Cups right now.
It's a hot thing.
Yeah. I met a person for coffee the other day, and I didn't pick the place, but I thought, well, I'll go get, I don't.
Sure.
My coffee was $6.63. And the line was 15 or 20 people long. And a lot of them were relatively young people. And I thought, how many of you are actually thinking about spending $6.63 on a, relatively small cup of coffee and doing that on a regular basis? And so many other ways, whether going out to, it's Friday night. Yeah, let's go out for a beer or a cocktail, or, let's go to dinner. And all these ways to spend money. But here I was, I was kind of laughing at myself going, spending $6.63 on a cup of coffee gets my mind working and going, I'll probably never walk in here again, because I don't see the value in spending $6.63 for a cup of coffee that's going to be gone in 10 minutes.
Man, I had a very similar experience recently at a spot over on State. I can't ever go back.
Yeah.
It's bad. Listen, Zane, I have a lot more questions. This is going to have to be first of many, my guy, because we've been at this a long time. Yeah. I think over an hour now. Thank you for coming in, sir.
Thanks for having me.
And again, for people that are wondering, you have the Let's Be Honest podcast, which is great. You can be found on LinkedIn. You can be found on Instagram, Dr. Zane Sterling. You got little nuggets of wisdom out there, which are pretty cool.
We have fun with it.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks, sir.